Welcome everyone to this video on photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So these are kind of the main things we want you to know for photosynthesis. We need you to be able to describe the process. We need you to identify where photosynthesis occurs and what pigments are involved in it, and why some organisms are able to go through photosynthesis and others like us can't. So let's start with what is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, if we break the word down, photo means light, synthesis means to make. So the idea is we are making something with light. So it's the process by which plants and other organisms use light energy to convert water and carbon dioxide into oxygen and high energy carbohydrates. So when we talk about high energy carbohydrates, what we're really going to be talking about is we're going to be talking generally about the molecule called glucose. It is probably classified by scientists as the most important process, chemical reaction that occurs on Earth. When we talk about energy and where all energy originates from the sun. But we need to get that energy, and we can't collect that energy from the sun directly as humans. We need to get that energy from something else. And plants are kind of our solar-powered energy converters is really what they are. While we know quite a bit about what's going on, this wasn't always the case. And there were a couple key experiments with a couple key scientists that we want you to kind of have a general idea of. So there was three scientists we're going to talk about. I'm not a German-speaking person, never took German, so my apologies for the pronunciation. But there was this guy by the name of Jan van Helmont. And when he was back, this is back in 1643, so a long, long time ago. But the idea is he took a young willow plant, so you think about like a willow tree, and he planted it. And he planted it in a pot, and if you look at down here on the numbers, it was a 5-pound plant. And after 5 years' time, the only thing he gave it was water, so this 5-pound plant ended up being 169.69 pounds, 3 ounces. And what happened is over time, he had 200 pounds of soil, and it only went down 57 grams. So we started with 90,000 grams of soil, and he only lost 57 grams. So that's significant. So he had this willow tree, and what he did is he measured the mass of the soil and the plant at the beginning, and then he only added water, nothing but water. And the plant increased by 74 kilograms. So keep in mind, very rough, a kilogram is about 2 pounds, really 2.2 pounds, but about 2 pounds. So it gained like 140 pounds, essentially. 4 pounds is what this tree went up in 5 years. So his conclusion, this is important, that the mass gained by the plant came from the water because it was the only thing that he added. Okay, so that's what he concluded, that the only thing that the mass must have come from the water. Because what else did he put in? So plants gain mass from water. Now, not maybe 100% correct, but back in 1643, that is what he thought. Okay, so then that was 1643, then 1771. So fast forward 130 years. There was a guy by the name of Joseph Priestley, and he went through and he took a mint sprig. So mint is like a herb, right, or a spice. I don't know what you'd call it, I guess. And he put it in a glass case. So what he did is he took a candle and he put a glass jar over it. And what happens? Well, it shouldn't be a surprise. The candle burns out. Okay. So then what he did is he took this piece of mint and he put it in the glass jar with the candle lit. Then he put the lid on, and what he found is the candle remained lit longer. Which, if you look at this caption, is impressive that the candle would burn for several days. That's some candle, because most candles will only burn for hours, not days. But that's what the caption says, and I'm not exactly sure where we got this caption. But the key is the candle remained longer, lit longer. So Priestley came up with this conclusion that plants give off oxygen. Because if we burn a candle, it needs oxygen in order to burn, but once the oxygen runs out, the candle goes out. The fact that this candle remained lit meant that they were giving off that oxygen. Then 71 to 1779, so 8 years, There's a guy by the Jan Ingenhouse. He basically repeated Priestley's experiment, but he did something a little bit different. So some of the plants were exposed to the light, while some of them were not. Okay, so mint sprig in a candle, mint sprig in a candle. One was in the light, one was in darkness. Okay, and then he did this for 7 days. So what he found is that plants in light produce lots of oxygen, light, lots of oxygen, while plants in the dark did not. So if you notice, it's kind of hard to see, but their candle is still burning in that jar, that the one that was left in the light, but the candle in the dark, no flame. So what Ingenhouse found was that plants in the dark produce carbon dioxide, and plants need light for photosynthesis to occur. Okay, those are kind of the three things. So what organisms photosynthesize? Well, when we think of what plants that photosynthesize, the classic is plants. Yes, plants do, but there's other organisms that do too. Okay, we don't. Plants do. There's also algae and some bacteria that go through photosynthesis. This picture hopefully looks familiar. This picture is a picture of an Elodea that we looked at under the microscopes. We were able to see these chloroplasts. The hope was that these were going to be flowing around under a microscope. I don't think we had a lot of success with that flowing, but that's what we were looking at, is the chloroplasts of the plant cell. This equation, this equation, this equation, this equation, this is an important equation. This is what you need to know. You need to know the chemical equation, the balanced chemical reaction of photosynthesis. Okay, so what do plants need? Well, they need carbon dioxide and they need water in order for them to live. And through the process of photosynthesis, in the presence of light energy, the sun, they produce glucose and oxygen. So carbon dioxide, water, and light produce glucose and oxygen. Okay, so the idea is von Helmont said, hey, plants need water. Ingenhouse said that glucose is a byproduct, and Priestley said that in light, plants give off oxygen. Okay, so plants get carbon dioxide and water from the atmosphere and the soil, but they must have light in order for photosynthesis to occur. Glucose. Glucose is this molecule that we refer to as a sugar. It's a simple sugar. It's a single sugar. It's a basic building block of food. Okay, there's other types of sugars. Glucose is the classic one that we talk about. So when we talk about glucose, we're talking about what we burn in our bodies is glucose for an energy source. What plants produce is glucose as an energy source. So the primary purpose, the reason why it happens, photosynthesis, is to store energy in chemical bonds of food molecules. By putting energy into chemical bonds, we can store it, or plants can store it for a later time. Chlorophyll is this pigment that is found in the chloroplasts that help to rearrange the atoms. Okay, so the reactants and the products. Okay, so what do we need? The reactants, remember, are the things that go in. So these are the reactants, carbon dioxide and water, and these are the products. What is given off, what is produced is glucose and oxygen. So glucose and oxygen are the products of photosynthesis. Light energy is transferred into chemical energy to create this glucose molecule. It's a transforming of energy. It's not a creation. It's not energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It simply transforms from one energy source to another. This energy-rich carbohydrate becomes food for plants, algae, and bacteria themselves, as well as to feed us. So plants produce glucose for themselves. Okay, the reason why plants photosynthesize is they need food for themselves. We sometimes eat plants for the purpose of energy, but that's because they produce excess. And if we harvest it, we can eat it, and we can kind of basically steal that food. And if we eat something else that ate a plant, we're still getting the energy from the plants, which got it from the sun. It's kind of this pyramid effect. So we talk about food pyramids. So when we talk about light, we often talk about absorption or reflection of light. So hopefully you remember back from some science class, Roy G. Bibb. And the idea is white light, like light from the sun, is considered white. But if you were to run it through a prism, it can get diffraction and you get Roy G. Bibb. So we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet are the spectrum. And we can take a prism and we can get that all out. So chlorophyll is this pigment, and it is found in the chloroplast. So there's two different types of chlorophyll, A and B, and I'm not really concerned about that. But the idea is they absorb certain regions. So if we look at this, we have chlorophyll, blue, violet, right? We get this absorption, meaning they're absorbing, they're sucking it in. So we get this absorption spectrum on the blue, violet, and we kind of get this absorption spectrum down here on the red, where we get almost no absorption, zero absorption, is right here on the green section. So why are leaves green? They're not green because they absorb green. They're green because they reflect the green light. So come fall, now what we're starting to see is these colors that had been absorbed, but green leaves because they reflect. They do not absorb green light. So all this takes place in an organelle called the chloroplast, and it's found only in plants, bacteria, and algae. So light transfers directly into electrons. It's this whole process of like picking up high energy electrons and transporting it through these different membranes. But it's this movement of electrons that help form these glucose molecules that will be used in cellular respiration. So why do we eat food? We eat food to break it down later in a process called cellular respiration. We'll get to that in this unit. We're not there yet. But the idea is glucose is formed from energy. And this is a very detailed picture of what happens, and is way more detailed than we really care about. But the idea is we take these high energy electrons and we form and we store, and the plants store energy as glucose, and it all occurs in the chloroplast. This picture is something that you should be able to label. This picture is something you should be able to label. So in the chloroplast, there's a majority of photosynthesis takes place here. There's two different things. There's called the thylakoids and the stroma. So if we look at this structure, we have our thylakoid right here, which is really just like this pancake individually kind of stacked up, stack of pancakes. It's the stack. And then the stroma is the fluid, the goo, the gel in between. It's kind of like if this were a cell, it'd be the cytoplasm. But because we're talking about a chloroplast found within a cell, it's something different. But it's really the stroma is the gel-like, the fluid that surrounds these thylakoid stacks. Okay, and these stacks are called a granum, but we don't really, the key is thylakoid and stroma. Okay, this is a good thing for you to write down. That's why we have in your guided notes. There's a couple different sheets that we're gonna put it on. This is something you should expect to be able to label at another point.